Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the 40th floor, the wheels making a soft squeaking sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the Pinnacle Tech Corporation building was still mostly empty. This was her favorite time of day. The silence gave her space to think, to observe, and to remember who she really was beneath the gray uniform and worn sneakers. She had been cleaning these same floors for 3 years now, 3 years of being invisible, 3 years of watching. Some of the most powerful people in the business world treat her like she was nothing more than a piece of furniture that happened to move around and clean things. The elevator doors opened, and Maria quickly stepped aside, lowering her eyes to the floor. 3 executives in expensive suits walked out, their voices loud and confident as they discussed their weekend golf plans. They brushed past her without a glance, their conversation never pausing, as if she simply didn't exist. "Did you see the numbers from the Peterson deal?" one of them said, adjusting his gold watch. "Blackstone is going to be thrilled." Maria continued pushing her cart, but her ears were sharp. She had learned that people said the most interesting things when they thought no one important was listening. And to them, the cleaning lady definitely wasn't important. She entered the first office on her route, belonging to the head of marketing. The desk was cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and what looked like the remains of yesterday's lunch. Maria had cleaned this same mess countless times before. As she emptied the trash can, she noticed a document that had fallen behind the desk. Without thinking, she picked it up to throw it away, but the numbers caught her eye. The document showed budget allocations that didn't match what she had overheard in meetings. There were discrepancies that made her stomach tighten with recognition. She had seen this kind of creative accounting before, in another life, in another country. But she quickly shook her head and crumpled the paper. That life was over. Now. She was just Maria the janitor. Moving from office to office, Maria fell into her routine. Dust the surfaces, empty the trash, vacuum the floors, and blend into the background. She had perfected the art of being invisible. She kept her hair tied, back in a simple ponytail, wore no makeup, and always kept her eyes down. When people spoke to her, which was rare, she would nod and respond in broken English. Even though she understood every word perfectly, around 8 a.m. the building started to come alive. Employees began arriving, filling the halls with chatter and the smell of coffee. Maria moved her cart to the side as a group of young executives rushed past, their arms full of presentation folders. "The big meeting is today," one of them said breathlessly. "If Blackstone likes our proposal, we could be looking at promotions." "Yeah, but you know how he is," another replied. "One wrong word, and you're back to square one." Maria had heard about Richard Blackstone long before she ever saw him. The CEO of Pinnacle Tech was known for his quick temper and even quicker decisions about people's careers. She had watched dozens of employees come and go, some leaving with tears in their eyes after brief meetings in his corner office. The corner office, that was always her last stop of the day. Blackstone usually arrived around 10 a.m., after she had finished cleaning his space. It was the largest office on the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. The desk was massive, made of dark wood that cost more than most people made in a year. As Maria dusted the bookshelf behind his desk, she couldn't help but notice the books. Most were about business strategy and leadership, but there were several that made her pause. Books about offshore banking, tax shelters, and corporate restructuring. These weren't the kind of books you read for casual interest. "Hey, you!" Maria jumped, nearly dropping her cleaning spray. A junior executive stood in the doorway, looking annoyed. "Blackstone is coming in early today. You need to be done in 5 minutes." Maria nodded quickly and mumbled, "Yes, sir, almost finished." The man rolled his eyes and walked away, muttering something about these people under his breath. As Maria hurriedly finished cleaning, she heard voices approaching. She recognized Blackstone's deep, commanding tone immediately. Panicking slightly, she looked around for a place to finish her work quietly. There was a small supply closet connected to the office, and she quickly moved her cart there, leaving the door slightly open so she could make sure the coast was clear before leaving. "The quarterly numbers are exactly where we need them," Blackstone was saying as he entered his office. "The board won't ask too many questions if we keep showing growth." "What about the pension fund situation?" another voice asked. Maria recognized it as the CFO, a nervous man named Peterson. "What about it?" "We borrowed from it. We'll pay it back. Eventually, the employees don't need to know the details." Maria's hands froze on her cleaning supplies. Borrowing from employee pension funds without disclosure was illegal. She had seen companies destroyed by exactly this kind of mismanagement. "But the auditors," Peterson started. "The auditors see what we show them," Blackstone cut him off. "Just keep doing what you're doing. And Peterson?" This conversation never happened. Maria waited until she heard them leave before carefully pushing her cart out of the closet. Her heart was beating fast, and not from the fear of being caught. She had just overheard something that could affect hundreds of employees' retirement futures. For the rest of the day, Maria couldn't concentrate on her work. As she moved through the building, she found herself looking at the employees differently. The young woman in accounting who always smiled and said good morning. The security guard who worked nights to support his family. The other janitors who, like her, were just trying to make an honest living. Did any of them know their pension money was being gambled with? That evening, as Maria rode the bus home to her small apartment, she stared out the window at the city. Lights. 3 years ago, when she had first taken this job, she had promised herself she would keep her head down and stay out of trouble. She had already lost everything once. She couldn't afford to lose what little she had built here, but as the bus stopped at her corner, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She would start paying closer attention. She would start remembering things. And maybe, just maybe, she would start documenting what she saw and heard. After all, someone needed to protect those employees. And sometimes the most invisible person in the room was exactly the right person for the job. Maria walked up the stairs to her apartment, her mind already working on a plan she didn't fully understand yet. Tomorrow, she would go back to being the invisible janitor, but now she would be watching and listening with a purpose that went far beyond just cleaning offices. The game was about to change, even if nobody knew it yet. The first time it happened, Maria thought it might have been an accident. She had just finished mopping the executive conference room floor when Richard Blackstone walked in with his coffee, took one look at the wet floor sign, and deliberately stepped right through the middle of her work. His expensive leather shoes left muddy prints across the clean tiles. "Oops," he said with a smirk, not sounding sorry at all. "Guess you'll have to do that again." Maria stood there for a moment, holding her mop, watching the CEO of the company walk away without a second thought. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe he was in a hurry. Maybe he didn't see the sign. But deep down, she knew better. The incidents started happening more often after that. Maria would clean a bathroom, only to find coffee grounds scattered across the floor an hour later. She would organize the supply closet, and the next day everything would be thrown around like someone had been looking for something in a hurry. At first, she thought it was just bad luck or careless employees. But then she started noticing patterns. It was always the same group of people. Blackstone and his inner circle of executives. The ones who wore the most expensive suits and talked the loudest in meetings. They seemed to take pleasure in creating extra work for her, as if her time meant nothing at all. One Tuesday morning, Maria was cleaning Blackstone's office when she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized the CEO's laugh immediately. It was loud and harsh, the kind of laugh that didn't sound happy at all. "Did you see the cleaning lady yesterday?" Blackstone was saying. "I swear she was moving slower than my grandmother, and my grandmother's been dead for 10 years. The group erupted in laughter. Maria's hands tightened on her cleaning cloth, but she kept working, pretending she couldn't understand what they were saying. "Maybe we should get younger cleaners," another voice suggested. "These old ones probably can't even read the labels on the cleaning supplies. Half of them probably don't speak English anyway," a third person added. "As long as they can push a mop around, who cares?" Maria felt her face burn with anger and shame. She was only 35 years old, not old at all, and her English was perfectly fine, better than fine, actually. But they saw her as nothing more than a stereotype, a woman who existed only to clean up their messes. The comments became a regular thing. Every time Maria was within earshot, they would make jokes about the help or comment on how lucky she was to have a job at such a prestigious company. They talked about her like she was deaf, like she couldn't understand their cruel words. But the worst part wasn't the words. It was the deliberate sabotage. Maria would spend an hour carefully arranging the conference room for an important meeting, making sure every chair was perfectly positioned and every surface gleamed. Then, minutes before the meeting started, one of Blackstone's assistants would come in and mess everything up, claiming they needed to rearrange things for better feng shui or some other ridiculous excuse. Maria would have to rush to clean everything again while the executives filed in. Shaking their heads and muttering about incompetent staff, they started leaving bigger messes too. Entire meals abandoned on desks, coffee spilled accidentally on carpets, and papers scattered across floors like confetti. Each mess came with the same expectation that Maria would clean it up without complaint, without recognition, and certainly without extra pay. The breaking point started building during the weeks leading up to the annual board meeting. This was the biggest event of the year at Pinnacle Tech, where Blackstone would present the company's performance to the board of directors and major shareholders. Everyone was stressed, working longer hours, and the executives were even more demanding than usual. Maria found herself working later and later, trying to keep up with the increased mess and the impossible standards. She would arrive at 6 in the morning and sometimes not leave until 8 at night. Her back ached constantly from bending over to clean up deliberately created disasters, and her hands were raw from the extra cleaning chemicals she had to use. One evening, as Maria was finally finishing up on the 40th floor, she overheard a conversation that made her stop dead in her tracks. Blackstone was talking on his phone in his office, and his door was slightly open. "The board meeting is going to be perfect," he was saying. "Profits are up, costs are down, and I'm recommending myself for a $2 million bonus this year." Maria's eyebrows shot up. $2 million? That was more money than she would make in her lifetime. What about the staff cuts? The person on the other end apparently asked, because Blackstone's response made Maria's blood run cold. "Oh yes, we're cutting the janitorial and maintenance budget by 30%. These people are replaceable. Honestly, we pay them too much as it is, and their benefits? Completely unnecessary. They're just grateful to have jobs." Maria gripped her mop handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. Benefits cuts? She and her coworkers already barely scraped by. The health insurance was the only reason she could afford to see a doctor when she got sick. Without it, one medical emergency could destroy everything she had worked to build. "The best part," Blackstone continued, "is that none of them will complain. They know they're lucky to work for a company like this. Where else are they going to go?" The cruel laughter that followed felt like a slap across Maria's face. Lucky? She worked harder than anyone in that building, often staying late, to fix problems caused by their carelessness, and they thought she should feel lucky. But the real humiliation was still coming. The day of the board meeting arrived, and Maria was assigned to work in the adjoining supply room, restocking items and making sure everything was perfect for the presentation. The boardroom was separated from the supply room by a thin wall and a door that didn't quite close all the way. Maria could hear every word of the meeting. Blackstone was in his element, presenting charts and graphs that showed how profitable the company had become under his leadership. The board members seemed impressed, asking questions about growth strategies and market expansion. Then someone asked about employee satisfaction and retention rates. Blackstone's answer would haunt Maria for months afterward. "Employee satisfaction is high across all departments," he said confidently. "Our staff understands they're part of something bigger than themselves. Why, I bet even our janitor could run this company better than our competitors." The room exploded with laughter. Maria heard chairs creaking as board members leaned back in amusement. Someone even started clapping. "That's the spirit that makes this company great," Blackstone continued, his voice full of fake pride. From the boardroom to the supply closet. Everyone knows their place and does their job with a smile. Maria stood frozen in the supply room, surrounded by cleaning supplies and extra office materials, listening to a room full of millionaires laugh at the idea that someone like her could ever be capable of anything more than pushing a mop. In that moment, something inside Maria broke. Not her spirit, that was stronger than they could ever imagine. What broke was her willingness to stay silent, to remain invisible, to let them continue believing they were better than everyone else just because they wore expensive suits and sat in leather chairs. As the meeting continued and the laughter died down, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She was done being the invisible woman. She was done letting them treat her and her coworkers like they were worthless. It was time for Richard Blackstone and his friends to learn exactly who they had been mocking all this time. And it was time for them to discover that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who can destroy you completely. Maria quietly finished restocking the supplies, but her mind was no longer on cleaning, it was on planning. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to smile. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment, staring at a box she hadn't opened in 3 years. It was tucked away in the back of her bedroom closet, hidden behind winter clothes and old shoes. For 3 years, she had pretended that box didn't exist. But tonight, everything was different. With shaking hands, she pulled the box out and set it on her kitchen table. The cardboard was slightly faded, and the tape had yellowed with age. She took a deep breath and carefully opened it. Inside were the remnants of her old life, her MBA diploma from Wharton Business School, certificates of achievement from the Columbian Institute of Finance, letters of recommendation from some of the most respected business leaders in South America, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small framed photo of her receiving an award for Outstanding Female Executive of the Year from the Bogota Chamber of Commerce. In the photo, Maria looked completely different. Her hair was styled. Professionally, she wore an expensive business suit, and she stood confidently behind a podium, smiling as she accepted the crystal trophy. The woman in that photo was Maria Santos-Chan, Chief Financial Officer of Corporación Meridian, one of Colombia's largest manufacturing companies. That woman felt like a stranger now. Maria traced her finger along the diploma. She had worked so hard for that MBA, studying in English as her second language, competing with some of the brightest minds in the world. She had graduated in the top 10% of her class and had job offers from companies across 3 continents. She had chosen to return to Colombia because she wanted to make a difference in her home country. Corporación Meridian seemed like the perfect opportunity. They were expanding rapidly, creating jobs, and helping modernize Colombia's economy. At least, that's what she thought at first. The truth was much darker. As CFO, Maria had access to all the company's financial records. At first, everything seemed normal. But as months passed, she started noticing irregularities, money going to companies that didn't seem to exist, payments for services that were never provided, contracts with suppliers who had no employees and no facilities. When she dug deeper, she discovered the horrifying truth. Corporación Meridian was a front for money laundering. Drug money was being cleaned through fake business transactions, hidden in legitimate-looking contracts and invoices. The company she thought was helping her country was actually part of the problem that was destroying it. Maria knew she had to do something. She spent weeks secretly copying files, photographing documents, and building a case that could expose the entire operation. She planned to take everything to the authorities and help shut down the scheme, but someone found out what she was doing. The night before she was supposed to meet with federal investigators, Maria received a phone call that changed her life forever. The voice on the other end was calm and polite, but the message was crystal clear. They knew where she lived. They knew where her parents lived. They knew her sister's address and where her nephew went to school. "You have 24 hours to leave the country," the voice said. "If you stay, if you talk to anyone, if you ever try to use those documents you copied, your family will pay the price. Do you understand?" Maria understood perfectly. She packed one suitcase, destroyed the evidence. She had gathered and bought a plane ticket to the United States with what little money she had in her personal account. She left behind her career, her home, her family, and everything she had worked for her entire life. For the first year in America, Maria lived in constant fear. She worked small jobs, always looking over her shoulder, never staying in one place. Too long, she couldn't use her real credentials because that would make her too easy to find. She learned to be invisible, to blend in, to become someone completely forgettable. The job at Pinnacle Tech was supposed to be temporary. Just something to pay the bills while she figured out her next move? But months turned into years, and Maria found a strange comfort in being invisible. Nobody expected anything from the quiet janitor. Nobody asked questions about her past. Nobody threatened her family. Until now, sitting in her apartment, looking at the proof of who she really was, Maria realized that she had been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. 3 years of cleaning offices had given her something more valuable than any MBA, access to information that most people would never see, while Blackstone and his executives had been treating her like furniture. Maria had been doing what she did best, analyzing financial data and spotting patterns that didn't make sense. The pension fund money that Blackstone was borrowing was just the beginning. Over the months, Maria had overheard conversations about offshore accounts, fake consulting fees, and revenue numbers that didn't match the company's actual performance. She had seen documents left carelessly on desks that showed how Blackstone was manipulating stock prices and insider trading, but this time, Maria wasn't going to run. She pulled out a notebook she had been keeping hidden in her apartment, a detailed record of everything she had seen and heard over the past year. Page after page of dates, times, names, and financial discrepancies, all written in a code that looked like innocent cleaning notes but actually documented a massive corporate fraud scheme. Maria had learned from her mistakes in Colombia. This time, she wasn't just collecting evidence. She was being smart about it. During her cleaning rounds, she had started taking photos of important documents with her phone, being careful to never take anything or leave any trace that she had been there. She had recorded conversations using a small device hidden in her cleaning cart. She had memorized account numbers, tracked money transfers, and built a timeline of criminal activity that would make federal investigators very interested. The best part was that nobody suspected anything. To them, she was still just the cleaning lady who barely spoke English. They continued their illegal activities right in front of her, never imagining that the woman emptying their trash cans had once managed budgets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but Maria knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help. From someone inside the system, someone with power and influence who could make sure the evidence was taken seriously. That's when she thought of Eleanor Hartwell. Eleanor was the only board member who had ever treated Maria with basic human dignity. She was an older woman, probably in her 60s, who always said good morning when she saw Maria in the hallways. She was known for asking about Maria's health during flu season and had once given her a small bonus at Christmas, saying she appreciated how hard Maria worked. More importantly, Eleanor was Pinnacle Tech's largest individual shareholder. She had built her own successful company from nothing and had a reputation for being honest and fair in all her business dealings. If anyone would listen to Maria's story and take action, it would be Eleanor. Maria spent the rest of the night planning her approach. She couldn't just walk up to Eleanor and start talking about financial fraud. She needed to be strategic to prove her credibility first, and to make sure Eleanor would take her seriously. The next morning, Maria went to work with a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just cleaning anymore. She was conducting an investigation. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. As she pushed her cart through the executive floors, Maria caught her reflection in a window. The woman looking back at her wasn't the scared refugee who had fled Colombia in the middle of the night. It wasn't the invisible janitor who had spent 3 years hiding from the world. It was Maria Santos Chun, the woman who had once been powerful enough to threaten an entire criminal organization. The woman who had graduated from one of the world's best business schools. The woman who understood corporate finance better than most of the executives in this building. And now, Richard Blackstone was about to find out exactly who he had been. Mocking all this time, Maria smiled as she entered the first office of the day. She had work to do, and this time she wasn't going to let anyone stop her from seeing justice done. Maria's plan began on a Monday morning at exactly 5:47 a.m. She had been awake for hours, going over every detail in her mind. Today, she would take the first step toward bringing down Richard Blackstone. But she had to be smart about it. One wrong move and everything could fall apart. Her first stop wasn't the office. Instead, Maria walked to a small internet cafe 3 blocks from her apartment. She paid cash for 30 minutes of computer time and sat down at a terminal in the back corner, away from the security cameras. Using a fake email address she had created weeks earlier, Maria began typing her first message. It was addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission's fraud tip line. She had researched the process carefully, knowing that anonymous tips were taken seriously when they came with solid evidence. "Dear SEC Investigation Team," she wrote, "I am writing to report serious financial crimes at Pinnacle Tech Corporation. The CEO, Richard Blackstone, is engaged in insider trading, pension fund theft, and securities fraud. I have evidence including dates, account numbers, and documentation." Maria attached photos of documents she had taken with her phone, being careful to crop out anything that might identify her as the source. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, internal memos discussing stock manipulation, email screenshots, revealing insider information being shared before public announcements. She hit send and felt her heart racing. There was no going back now. Her next email went to investigative reporters at 3 different newspapers. Maria had studied their previous work and knew they specialized in corporate fraud cases. She used the same evidence but wrote different letters to each reporter, approaching the story from different angles to increase the chances that at least one would take it seriously. To the business reporter at the Herald, she focused on the financial crimes and their impact on shareholders. To the investigative team at the Tribune, she emphasized the pension fund theft and how it would hurt working families. To the financial columnist at the Times, she provided detailed analysis of how the stock manipulation scheme worked. Each email ended the same way: "More evidence is available from a source inside the company. This source will only communicate through secure channels and requests complete anonymity for safety reasons." By the time Maria left the internet cafe, she had set 3 investigations in motion. But the hardest part was still ahead of her. That afternoon, Maria waited in the lobby of Pinnacle Tech until she saw Eleanor Hartwell leaving her office. Eleanor was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes, always dressed in simple but elegant clothes. She was known for taking the stairs instead of the elevator and for remembering the names of security guards and receptionists. "Mrs. Hartwell," Maria called out softly as Eleanor reached the elevator. Eleanor turned around, surprised to see the janitor in the lobby during business hours. "Oh, hello, Maria. Is everything all right?" Maria's heart pounded. This was the moment that would change everything. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to speak with you about something very important." "But not here." "It's about the company, about Mr. Blackstone. There are things you need to know." Eleanor's expression grew serious. She had built her own company from nothing and had survived in the business world long enough to recognize when something was genuinely wrong. "Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street in an hour?" "The one with the blue awnings?" Maria nodded. "Thank you." "And Mrs. Hartwell, please don't tell anyone about this meeting." "Not yet." An hour later, Maria sat across from Eleanor in a quiet corner booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she was too nervous to drink. Eleanor waited patiently, sensing that whatever Maria had to say was difficult. "Mrs. Hartwell," Maria began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I need to tell you something about myself first, so you'll understand why you should listen to me." Maria reached into her purse and pulled out a folder containing copies of her degrees and certificates. She placed them on the table between them. Eleanor's eyes widened as she examined the documents. "You have an MBA from Wharton? My name is Maria Santos-Chun. I was the chief financial officer of Corporación Meridian in Colombia until 3 years ago. I came to the United States because I discovered financial crimes at my company and received death threats when I tried to expose them. Eleanor looked up from the papers, her expression a mixture of shock and concern. Maria, why are you working as a janitor if you have these qualifications? Because I needed to disappear. I needed a job where nobody would ask questions or do background checks. I needed to be invisible while I rebuilt my life. Maria took a deep breath. But I haven't been just cleaning for the past 3 years. I've been watching, I've been listening. And I've been documenting crimes that make my old company look like amateurs. For the next hour, Maria told Eleanor everything. She showed her photos of documents, played recordings of conversations, and walked her through the complex web of financial crimes she had uncovered. Eleanor listened without interruption, her business experience allowing her to understand the full scope of what Maria was revealing. The pension fund money alone is over $2 million, Maria explained. But that's just what I can prove. The offshore accounts, the insider trading, the fake consulting fees, we're talking about tens of millions in stolen money. Eleanor sat back in her chair looking overwhelmed. Maria, this is criminal. If what you're saying is true, Richard could go to prison for decades. It's all true. And I've already contacted the SETI and several journalists. But I need your help to make sure this is handled properly. The board needs to know what's happening before the investigators arrive. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she looked up at Maria with new respect. What do you need me to do? I need you to call an emergency board meeting. I need the chance to present this evidence to the full board before Blackstone realizes what's happening. And I need your support when I reveal who I really am. You're going to tell them you're not just a janitor? Maria smiled for the first time in the conversation. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to tell them exactly who's been cleaning their offices for the past 3 years. I think they're going to be very surprised. Over the next 2 weeks, Maria and Eleanor worked together to prepare for the confrontation. Eleanor used her influence as the largest shareholder to call for an emergency board meeting, citing serious concerns about company financial practices without revealing the specifics. Meanwhile, Maria continued her normal cleaning routine, but now she was gathering final pieces of evidence. She photographed Blackstone's personal calendar, showing meetings with offshore banking representatives. She recorded a phone conversation where he discussed moving money to accounts in the Cayman Islands. She even managed to get copies of bank statements from his unlocked desk drawer. The journalists had started calling Pinnacle Tech's corporate office, asking questions about financial irregularities. The SEC had opened a formal investigation and requested documents. Blackstone was getting nervous, but he had no idea where the investigation was coming from. 3 days before the board meeting, Maria did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She went shopping for business clothes. She bought a simple but professional suit, a white blouse, and low-heeled shoes. She had her hair professionally styled and practiced speaking in the confident tone she had once used in boardrooms across Colombia. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, looking at the woman she was about to become again. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the invisible janitor in the gray uniform. In her place stood Maria Santos Chun, former CFO and soon-to-be corporate whistleblower. The next morning, Maria arrived at work as usual, wearing her janitor's uniform one last time. She cleaned the offices methodically, saying silent goodbyes to the routine that had hidden her for 3 years. She emptied Blackstone's trash can for the final time, dusted his expensive furniture, and vacuumed his Persian rug. Tomorrow she would walk into that same office wearing a business suit and carrying evidence that would destroy him. Tomorrow, the man who had mocked the cleaning lady would discover that the woman he had been humiliating was about to become his worst nightmare. As Maria finished her final day as a janitor, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt powerful. She felt ready. And most importantly, she felt like herself again. The game was about to end, and Maria was holding all the winning cards. Friday afternoon arrived with unusual tension in the air at Pinnacle Tech, word had spread quickly about the emergency board meeting, and employees were whispering in hallways about what could be so urgent that it couldn't wait for the regular monthly meeting. Richard Blackstone strutted through the office that morning with his usual confidence, but Maria noticed something different about him. He seemed more on edge, checking his phone constantly and snapping at his assistants over minor issues. The SEC investigation and journalist inquiries were clearly getting to him, but he still had no idea where the heat was coming from. Maria spent the morning doing her regular cleaning duties, but her mind was focused on the afternoon ahead. At 2 p.m., she would walk into that boardroom and change everything. She had rehearsed what she would say dozens of times, but her heart still raced every time she thought about the moment when Blackstone would see her in a business suit instead of a janitor's uniform. At 1:30 p.m., Maria quietly slipped into the employee bathroom on the 39th floor and opened the garment bag she had hidden there earlier. Inside was her transformation, the navy blue business suit, white blouse, and professional shoes that would announce to the world that she was no longer invisible. As she changed clothes, Maria caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was someone she hadn't seen in 3 years, professional, confident, and ready for battle. She applied a small amount of makeup, styled her hair, and put on the simple gold earrings that had been her grandmother's. The final touch was a leather briefcase containing printed copies of every piece of evidence she had gathered. Bank statements, recorded conversations, transcribed word for word, photographs of documents, and a detailed timeline of criminal activity that would make any prosecutor's day. At exactly 2 p.m., Maria walked toward the boardroom. Her heels clicked on the marble floor, a sound she hadn't made in 3 years. Several employees did double takes as she passed, clearly confused about who this professional woman was and why she looked familiar. The boardroom was already full when Maria reached the door. Through the glass walls, she could see the 12 board members seated around the massive conference table. Eleanor Hartwell sat at the far end, her face calm but alert. And there, at the head of the table, was Richard Blackstone. Gesturing animatedly as he spoke to the group, Maria took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and knocked on the door. Eleanor looked up and nodded toward the door. "Come in, please." Maria entered the room, and the effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Board members looked confused, clearly wondering who this woman was and why she was interrupting their emergency meeting, but it was Blackstone's reaction that Maria would remember forever. His face went completely white, as if he had seen a ghost. His mouth fell open, and for the first time in the 3 years she had known him, Richard Blackstone was speechless. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor said, standing up, "I'd like you to meet Maria Santos-Chun, former Chief Financial Officer of Corporación Meridian and graduate of Wharton Business School." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Board members looked back and forth between Maria and Blackstone, trying to understand what was happening. "That's impossible," Blackstone finally managed to say, his voice shaky. That's our janitor." Maria smiled and set her briefcase on the table. "Hello, Mr. Blackstone. Yes, I've been cleaning your office for 3 years. And during that time, I've been documenting every illegal activity you've been involved in." She opened her briefcase and began pulling out documents, arranging them on the table like a lawyer presenting evidence to a jury. "For the past 36 months, while you all thought I was just the cleaning lady, I've been using my financial expertise to track money laundering, insider trading, pension fund theft, and securities fraud." The board members leaned forward, examining the documents Maria was spreading across the table. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, recorded conversations with timestamps and transcriptions, photographs of emails discussing illegal stock trades. "This is ridiculous," Blackstone said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "You can't trust anything from her. She's just trying to cause trouble." Maria turned to face him directly. "Mr. Blackstone, do you remember what you said during the board meeting 3 weeks ago? You said that even the janitor could run this company better than your competitors." She paused, letting that sink in. "Well, this janitor has an MBA in corporate finance and 7 years of experience managing budgets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She turned back to the board. Let me walk you through exactly what Mr. Blackstone has been doing with your company's money. For the next 45 minutes, Maria presented her case with the precision of a trained financial analyst. She showed how Blackstone had been stealing from employee pension funds, using company money for personal investments, and manipulating stock prices through insider trading. The pension fund theft alone totals $2.3 million. Maria explained, pointing to highlighted numbers on a bank statement. Money that was supposed to secure the retirement of over 400 employees has been moved to Mr. Blackstone's personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Board member after board member asked questions, and Maria answered each one with detailed evidence. She had recordings of Blackstone discussing the crimes. She had photographs of documents in his own handwriting. She had bank records showing exactly where the money went. The SEC opened a formal investigation 2 weeks ago based on evidence I provided, Maria continued. Federal investigators are already reviewing these same documents. The question isn't whether Mr. Blackstone is guilty. The question is what this board is going to do about it. Blackstone tried to defend himself, claiming the evidence was fake or taken out of context. But with each excuse he made, Maria pulled out another document that proved he was lying. She had been thorough, methodical, and patient. Every piece of evidence was solid. Finally, the chairman of the board called for a private discussion. Mr. Blackstone, we need you to leave the room while we deliberate. You can't be serious, Blackstone protested. You're going to believe her. Over me, I built this company. I made you all rich. Richard, Eleanor said quietly, you stole money from our employees' retirement funds. That's not building a company. That's destroying lives. Blackstone stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Maria remained standing at the head of the table, watching the board members discuss her evidence in hushed tones. 20 minutes later, they called Blackstone back in. The chairman's face was grim as he delivered the verdict. Richard Blackstone, the board has voted unanimously to terminate your employment immediately. Security will escort you from the building. All company credit cards and access codes are canceled as of this moment. Our legal team will be cooperating fully with federal investigators. Blackstone's face turned red with rage. This is a mistake. You'll regret this. That woman is nobody. She's just a cleaning lady. No, Mr. Blackstone, the chairman replied. That woman is the person who's going to save this company from the mess you created. Security guards appeared at the door to escort Blackstone out. As he passed Maria, he stopped and glared at her with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done, he whispered. Maria looked him straight in the eye. I know exactly what I've done. I've made sure that justice finally caught up with you. After Blackstone was gone, the board turned their attention back to Maria. The immediate question was who would run the company while they searched for a new CEO. Miss Santos-John, the chairman said, given your background and your obvious understanding of this company's operations, would you consider serving as interim CEO while we conduct a proper search? Maria felt tears spring to her eyes. 3 years ago, she had been forced to flee her home country and give up everything she had worked for. She had spent 1,000 days emptying trash cans and mopping floors, invisible to the people who now needed her expertise to save their company. I would be honored, she said. 6 months later, the board made Maria's appointment permanent. Under her leadership, Pinnacle Tech not only recovered from the scandal but became more profitable than ever. She implemented fair wages for all employees, restored the stolen pension funds with interest, and created a culture where every person was treated with respect regardless of their job title. Richard Blackstone was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for securities fraud, money laundering, and theft. The other executives involved in the scheme either resigned in disgrace or were fired, and Maria? She kept a small framed photo on her desk, not of her MBA graduation or her executive awards, but of herself in her janitor's uniform from that first day at Pinnacle Tech. It served as a reminder that you should never judge someone by their job title, because you never know who might be watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to seek justice. The woman they had mocked as Just a janitor had become the person who not only fired the CEO but replaced him, proving that sometimes the most underestimated person in the room is exactly the person you should fear the most.